So I want to go ahead and thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We had a wonderful video, and I hope you got to enjoy it, planned. I am D'Artagnan Scorza. I'm the president of the UCLA Alumni Association. I am so deeply excited to be here with each and every one of you tonight. I am a double Bruin, went to UCLA both for undergrad and grad school, also served in the US Navy, and wanted to come back and serve my community. So I founded an organization here in Los Angeles that serves young folk throughout the entire county, as well as in the state of Texas. And I'm proud to be here with you. I'm also the president of the Inglewood Unified School District Board of Education and a faculty member in the School of Public Health here in Fielding. Tonight, I'm really excited because this is one of our first town halls, if not the first one ever, both virtually for the UCLA Alumni Association, but also as we begin to think about how we stay connected to this time, it's an opportunity for us to keep you, our alums, updated and connected to what's going on here with your alma mater. You know, welcome to what will be the first of a series of town halls, and it's open to all UCLA alums. And I'm actually proud to say that we'll have a really exciting one planned for you, and I'll let you know who's going to join us for next month's town hall. The goal of our town halls is to make sure that, you know, you're receiving regular campus updates, that you're able to engage in conversation with UCLA leadership, our faculty, our staffs, our students, and our community of alums. We're going to begin our conversation tonight talking about COVID and how UCLA has been responding in this environment. As you know, COVID has had an impact on all of us, including the university, and understanding the state of our campus, as well as how we're preparing for it and dealing with it, and what we hope will be sort of our response in the future, is an important part of the conversation that we're going to have with you tonight. So I'm so pleased to have Vice Chancellor Michael Beck with us here to take us through UCLA's journey during this time. Michael is the Administrative Vice Chancellor and has served in this role since 2016. Vice Chancellor Beck, your portfolio seems to resemble that of a city manager here at UCLA. And, you know, I just want to start by asking you to share the scope of your role.
Thank you for inviting me this evening. It's great to be here, and happy to try and answer some questions. I may just pivot. You've got some questions, but I actually started it already on the PowerPoint, so we may just skip to that, and then we can move forward if that's okay.
Absolutely. And so as you're doing that, you know, I just want to thank you for your leadership, especially as it relates to UCLA's response in COVID. And as you prepare to walk us through the university's response and where we are today, we'll look forward to sharing questions with you from the audience.
Great, thank you so much. I'll try and go through this relatively quickly. This answers your first question, which is what is administration? What are the areas? And it is a rather large portfolio of about 11 different departments, from the business transformation office, which deals really with all of the major sort of transformative initiatives that we have on campus, human resources, the central ticket office, environmental health and safety, events and transportation and parking, facilities management, our financial and organizational services, housing and hospitality, IT, the police department, and our EMS program, and our pre-K through 12 programs in schools, which is sort of Geffen Academy, UCLA Lab, and early care and education. So the administration, our mission statement really is focusing on this idea of really delivering, you know, high quality, customer-oriented service to the campus, which is the foundation that allows UCLA to excel and fulfill its mission. So real quickly, I was just going to do a quick summary on some of the major initiatives that we're working on this year. IT assessment and unification. UCLA has an IT organization with over 40 different IT entities, and we're trying to make sure that we make that as robust as possible. Reimagining human resources, really trying to utilize, again, this sort of hub and spoke approach of bringing together the university in a single way to support the incredible workforce that we have and allow them to build. And then really undertaking enormous process improvements, reducing inefficiencies and improving customer service, really looking at public safety and identifying how public safety can be reimagined in our world today, Also working on 2028 Olympics and Paralympic Games, and then investing in new housing. And before I get to COVID, I wanted to start with something exciting because I think some of you might have really appreciated that. And just as a reminder, we have about 15,000 undergraduate beds. Unfortunately, about 1,500 of them are filled today, but that's where we normally are. About 3,600 graduate beds and about 191 faculty housing units, which are either single-family homes, condos, or apartments. The intent is for us to guarantee housing to all entering first-year students for 4 years, meaning which they would be guaranteed on campus housing from UCLA for 4 years and transfer students for a full 2 years, expanding graduate housing to support the need there, and provide all of this at a below market rate compared to the surrounding market, and really provide incredible student amenities to improve the quality of student life and the academic experience at UCLA. We are undertaking a little over $1 billion worth of investment currently, building out a little over 5,000 new undergraduate beds and 321 new graduate beds, 436 new graduate apartments, and about 80 new faculty apartments. The projects here, the one on the bottom is phase 2 of a 3-phase project that we recently purchased, and that has a city target in it, which is exciting, helps support the lower the cost of the rent. And then the other 3 buildings, you see we've got a lot of cranes in Westwood at the moment. So pivoting now to the sort of COVID and where we are, we put together what we have is what we call the COVID-19 Response and Recovery Task Force, which is made up of a number of different working groups that help identify specific issues to make sure that all of the work is coordinated on the campus. And give you a quick summary, in March, we had to shift about 46,000 students and about 22,000 employees to remote learning and working. That worked very effectively and in a very short moment. And give you an idea, we're all getting so used to Zoom. We used to do about 4,500 Zooms a week in February. And last week we did almost 75,000 Zooms, Zoom sessions last week. So you look at the significant reliance on this type of media. We ended up distributing about 1,000 new and about 1,100 laptops, iPads, and MacBooks to students who did not have their own technology, and ended up shipping them to students who did not come to campus or weren't in Westwood, or they could pick them up if they were in the area. And this was all done at no cost to the students. We also ended up buying a little over 500 Wi-Fi devices so that they could have access to Wi-Fi so that they could make sure that they could stream their classrooms effectively. And this is something that was important to put together to make sure that all students have the same access to the classroom, regardless of their income or their community. Significant number of communications out to the campus, whether it's on the main website of Bruin Safe Online or the special website we created, COVID-19. There's enormous amount of content, resources, tools. We've distributed about 71 different Bruin posts during the pandemic, and multiple forums, sent out surveys to evaluate how students and staff are responding to this, and increase the number of trainings for staff to be able to work remotely more effectively. Develop numerous protocols and procedures that are all based on LA County's Department of Public Health order, really trying to focus on providing guidelines and making sure that we have protocols to do this in as safe a way as possible. Also undertook testing on campus. So started with baseline, so individual students that were coming back to live on campus or to take classes, then they were tested under baseline and ended up being sequestered for 7 days and took another test so that they could, we felt comfortable that they could safely participate in on-campus activities. faculty and staff associated with providing or supporting in-person instruction were also tested. And then for the last, since the quarter began, we've been doing what we call surveillance testing, which is testing all students, faculty, and staff who live, learn, or work near the campus or on the campus would receive testing at regular intervals. Give you an idea, that means we're doing, starting on Monday, where we ramp this up further, we'll be doing somewhere between 2,500 to 3,000 tests a day. Number of positive COVID cases that have happened, have occurred since March is 206 students, and these are not, and in fact, the majority of them are individuals who have not been on the campus for months, but we do try to track all of our community that has unfortunately ended up catching the virus. And we had 2 of our pre-K through 12 students, 107 faculty and staff, but that does not include staff or associated with the healthcare, with the hospital and the medical center. And then we unfortunately had 1 fatality of one of our employees. So many folks are looking at the idea of what's the sort of phased return to campus. What does it look like? Currently, UCLA is technically closed to the general public, except for those that need to go to the medical enterprise. And we have significantly reduced in-person course offerings with everything, for the most part, being delivered remotely. Work is conducted remotely for the most part, and on-site work is limited to essential operations and those that are supporting the remote learning environment. The events and gatherings on campus are prohibited at this time. Fortunately for some, athletics has been allowed under the state guidance for collegiate sports to actually undertake training and competition at this time. And we're continuing to wait to get additional orders that allow us to pivot the campus or ramp up some additional campus activities when LA County transitions from purple to red. So what does winter or spring look like? When might we see a picture like this again? What we need to be continuing to look for is maintaining lower case rate in LA County and within the UCLA community, and make sure that there's high compliance with the mitigation measures, including the wearing of facial coverings and physical distancing on campus. Make sure that the availability of testing capacity is widely available and relatively affordable to the campus. We do offer it to our community at no cost to any of the faculty, staff, or students. And then making sure we have robust contact tracing that can quickly identify any close contacts. We operate all of that in-house. The testing is actually one of the exciting aspects of the testing. Is we've had some faculty that have developed a high throughput, low cost testing. We filed for the CLIA application yesterday, and we expect to be able to open that lab, which would give us a testing capacity of as many as 40,000 tests a week. 40,000 tests a day. And that'll give us an opportunity to support some of the other UC campuses that don't have medical centers or the ability to provide high throughput and low cost testing, as well as potentially some Cal State campuses as well. And ultimately, not likely to see the picture have that level of population on campus, unfortunately, until a vaccine is available. So that is a very sort of quick summary. I wanted to make sure that we left plenty of time to answer questions that all of you might have, and make sure that I'm available to make sure that we can provide information that's important to all of you.
Thank you so much, Vice Chancellor Beck. We really appreciate you taking the time and being here with us tonight. And we have quite a few questions for you. And so for those of you who would like to submit a question, please do so at this time. We're going to do our best to either answer them live or respond to you with a typed answer. I'm also going to be listening to and taking questions from folk who are either sending them through social media or have emailed them ahead of time. And so if you have a question, more than happy to try and get those answered for you. And we'll do our best to respond tonight. So first question we have tonight, Vice Chancellor Beck, is has winter indoor spring admission programs, have they been expanded?
So right now, winter quarter, we'll actually be putting out a Bruin post and posting classes on Monday and then posting classes on Tuesday. So I don't want to necessarily spill the beans there, but it is that LA County is still in purple, and we do not have the authority, or we do not have the permission to provide on-site courses except for those that are deemed essential, which is similar to what we're doing now. So next week we'll actually be announcing for winter quarter, but I'm afraid it's going to look very much like it does right now.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that.
Spring quarter, I'm sorry, as it relates to spring, we're much more optimistic that we will be able to bring back more students to the campus in the spring. It would still be highly restricted, where the classes wouldn't be able to exceed probably 40 students, and would likely be restricted to about 25% occupancy for the campus.
Okay, fantastic. That's helpful. I think that answered a couple of questions for some of our attendees. You know, a couple of questions that are coming in really center on housing. And so I'm going to ask you about housing allocations. And so a question from one of our attendees is, has it been changed to 3 to 4 per room or 2 per room? What is the housing allocation situation looking like now and perhaps in the near future?
So right now, we actually have about 650 students that are living on the Hill. We would normally have about 14,000 right now. And so every student has their own private room and their own private bathroom because under the county guidelines, we're not allowed to open up our housing program. So we're housing those individuals who really don't have other housing, safe housing alternatives. And where UCLA is really their primary residence.
I think that's really good to know. And I think similar to that, folk are wondering, you know, how much housing is available? Is it adequate near the campus for grad and undergrad students who have an immediate need? Is there enough, or is there sort of a limit right now if, you know, you have students that may not have adequate housing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So those that we're expecting to live in UCLA housing, but ended up not being able to be selected for housing. I'm not sure they've taken up significant occupancy in the North Village. We only have anecdotal information at the moment, but there seems to be more vacancies than usual. Even in our graduate student housing, where we would have over 3,500 students, we only have 3,200, and there was no limits on graduate housing. That was handled normally because it's considered apartment living. And even in our undergraduate apartments, where we had anticipated housing about 1,500 students, I think we have about 900 students living in those facilities. And those are de-densified. The undergraduate apartments is lower density than we would normally have. The graduate housing is the same density.
Okay, that's really helpful. I think still on the topic of housing, there are some students who are wondering, well, you know, will it be possible to provide housing for third-year students, you know, when they return to the 21-22 school year?
So if in fact we're able to go back to sort of a more normal environment, we will actually have 2 of the 3 housing projects that I mentioned earlier will be completed. And so we'll be able to house a few thousand additional students, and hopefully we'll be able to also be able to put a normal 2 or 3 occupants per room. And so we should actually be in better position in the fall of 2021 than we would have otherwise been absent COVID, because of the fact that we have 2 large, one large apartment, 17-story apartment building that we're finishing construction on, and then a new dormitory facility that'll.
And that, I'm assuming that includes housing that may be available once a vaccine is provided. So I'm assuming we're going to stay in this posture. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what I hear you saying is that we'll stay in this posture pending a vaccine to maintain safety. We'll provide housing for students who are in need to the extent possible. But that's when the university will sort of reopen when we get state guidelines, et cetera. Is that a fair assessment? Is that correct?
That's correct. If we move to phase two, to stage 2, which would be red in the state guidelines, we could end up moving more students into housing, and that would be limited to one student per room.
Okay, fantastic. And let's move on to
no, go ahead. And then we would always reserve, which we do now, a certain percentage of the rooms set aside for quarantine and isolation. So any student that ends up testing positive for COVID or is considered a close contact, we'd be able to put them in their own housing facility to keep them safe and then protect the community from potential spread. So that's always reducing our total inventory at the moment. Even if we pivot up to one person per room, we'll still might have 3,500 students instead of 700.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. So if you're listening in tonight, you joined our UCLA Alumni Association Town Hall. We're speaking with Vice Chancellor Michael Beck, who's the Vice Chancellor of Administration. If you have a question, please go ahead and type it in. We'll do our best to answer it live tonight. I'm also going to shift to questions that are coming in from social media and questions that were emailed ahead of time. So Vice Chancellor Beck, let's go ahead and transition briefly to COVID tracing. So some of the questions that are coming in really asks us and asks the university, how are you tracking people who are, getting COVID both on and off campus?
So we actually stood up our own contact tracing operation and trained. And one thing that's actually an important side note is UCLA, in a partnership with UC San Francisco, actually trained all of the state and county contact tracers. So we built up a program to do all of that. So it was very easy for us to then pivot and do our own training of our own personnel. So that's handled for anybody who is related as part of the UCLA community, and anybody who might be a close contact in the community not related to UCLA, then we would turn that over to LA County to follow up.
Okay, fantastic. That's really helpful to hear. I think a lot of folk are just wondering as well, what's the impact on campus been, on the university's finances, been from COVID?
So it's actually been quite devastating, primarily for the hospital and the medical operation, and for housing and dining, our conference programs, and for the alumni who had hoped to go to Bruin Woods, all of that. So just in administration, so just in my 11 departments, we'll lose over $325 million between March of last year and June of 2021. The campus is likely to lose over, well, the hospital system could lose a similar amount.
Wow. I mean, that's
and then UC overall, it will be well over $1 billion.
I mean, that's important for people to know, right? That the impact that COVID has had on a number of our operations has been significant. And I think that sort of goes to, some of the questions that folk are asking around, the rates that students are going to be expected to pay, as well. And so on the Hill, for example, will there be, what can people expect to pay for housing, tuition, fees, et cetera? Are there any answers that you may be able to share about that in the near future and going forward?
I mean, even though we're going to lose just on the housing side, hundreds of millions of dollars between March and June, fortunately, we have a very strong program. It's very well run. And so we're still planning increases to be less than 3% a year when we do our modeling for the next 10 years. We're not looking to sort of recapture the losses in a brief time by increasing rates in excess of what we would normally do. The good news is that because UCLA runs such a strong program, we had some significant reserves that were available for expansion, which we've been doing with the over $1 billion worth of new construction and acquisitions. And we were able to take a very low interest loan, about $125 million, from a large $1.5 billion offering for the University of California, and that will help us on our on the necessary cash, and then we'll be able to rebuild the reserves as soon as we can have all of the students back into our campus housing program. And so we'll be doing that at our normal pace of 2.5% to 3% increases per year, but trying to stay under the CPI.
That's great. I appreciate you sharing that, because I know that there are considerations for students that may be facing economic difficulties at this time, right? So hearing that the rates are going to stay fairly steady over time is really helpful to hear. And I guess, for our students who may be facing financial challenges, who may be economically vulnerable, or even, have a greater degree of financial need, has the university sort of taken any steps to help support those students at this time?
There's actually a number of programs that the campus has that assists students in particular who have either housing insecurities, food insecurities, or other needs. And the program that I mentioned earlier about the technology program, there's a number of students that actually don't have their own computers and would normally go to the library to check out a computer for a couple hours to do their homework or do their work. And that's why we ended up purchasing additional laptops and iPads and MacBooks, so that those students who didn't have access to technology would be able to have their own technology in their home, wherever they're living, and then also not have to worry about access to Wi-Fi by providing them both the MiFi devices as well as the monthly unlimited data plan for the MiFi device, so that they wouldn't, their own financial situation wouldn't inhibit their ability to take remote classes.
Fantastic. So, I know we're going to talk about remote learning here very soon, but I think some of the questions that are coming in are around, like, the goals that the university has. I mean, UCLA has been a leader in environmental sustainability, has been a leader in a number of areas. How has COVID impacted our ability to maintain sort of our leadership in the area of sustainability? I mean, you're building new housing units now. We have solid policies in place. The university has done a lot of work with the California Public Utilities Commission. So tell us briefly, if you don't mind, about how we are maintaining our sustainability goals, or have they really, been a challenge to uphold?
So a little bit of both. The good news is we just recently adopted our new no plastics policy, plastics ban policy, which over the next few years will actually ban almost all plastics, single-use plastics on the campus, including from drink bottles. Unfortunately, because of COVID, the requirements are that we can't have reusable dishes in the dining halls or any of the eating establishments. So we've had to go back to single-use products in that environment, and that, of course, is not consistent with our own sustainability goals. We do use all combustible materials, but it does create much more waste than we normally would by reusing plates and cups and servingware. I think the good news in the long term is that we've learned that, particularly for remote work or telecommuting, can be done in many ways very effectively. And so we're looking at what the world might look like post-COVID, and we think we're going to see a much higher percentage of our workforce actually telecommuting either all week or a number of days per week, which certainly will continue to help a number of things. One, reduce the amount of carbon emissions associated with commuting, also increase the quality of life of individuals that end up commuting for an hour or more than 1 hour in one direction just to get to UCLA. So there could be some actually long-term benefits associated with what we're going through, and we're trying to figure out how we can take advantage of those opportunities and make sure that that works for the Bruin community as well as for our sustainable world.
Fantastic. So we're going to try and do our best to get to as many questions as possible. And I thank you so much, Vice Chancellor Beck, for joining us tonight. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to our UCLA Alumni Association Town Hall. I am D'Artagnan Scorza, the president of the UCLA Alumni Association. I'm joined tonight by Vice Chancellor Michael Beck. He is the Vice Chancellor of Administration here at the university. Vice Chancellor, we have a lot of questions tonight, but I really want to take a minute and pause and thank a few of our UCLA Alumni Association board members for joining us tonight. Coretta Harris, Todd Sargent, and John Gong, thank you so much for tuning in. Get to know your UCLA Alumni Association Board of Directors. Know that there are many opportunities to be a part of the UCLA Alumni Association. We welcome you to join. If you want to learn more, you can visit our website and get to know who your representatives are, who's holding up your association and representing your voice here on this campus. So, Vice Chancellor Beck, getting to this conversation about UCLA staff, right? We know that people have been concerned about being furloughed. And the UC Office of the President has provided quite a bit of direction on this, namely that there's proposed expanded curtailment that was sent to staff recently, and perhaps the likelihood that furloughs could happen in 2021. Can you speak to both of those issues that some of our audience members are raising?
Yeah, those are very different. I mean, when you look at the kind of losses in income and increased costs that I mentioned earlier in the hundreds of millions of dollars for the campus, it does seem likely that there have to be some savings going forward. Fortunately, because primarily Chancellor Block's leadership and his concern for the workforce to be let go in this economy, he's made a commitment that every employee that is willing to continue to work or be reassigned will continue to do so. Right now, it's through January, which is be almost 9 months of that commitment. And we are looking at, just issued a new curtailment on the campus side for winter. This would add 3 additional curtailment days during the winter closure. Our curtailment program is slightly different than what the Office of the President was proposing, where ours would allow employees to continue to use their vacation or other leave balances while they have those additional days off. And one of the reasons why we're really pushing hard for the extension this year is since March, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of employees that have continued to work nonstop on the campus, trying to serve the community either remotely or coming back to campus in person. And they really need a break. And the only way that many of our dedicated employees are going to be able to break is if everybody's taking a break. And so that's the approach in December. So we will have added 5 additional days, 3 work days, but 5 additional days to the curtailment period, and again they can use their break. The Office of the President proposal anticipates that individuals would take they would take 5 days, and they would have a potentially a varying number of days that would be considered unpaid. And so that's currently open for public comment, and a number of people are commenting. My personal concern is if you're going to have multiple days in a single pay period for which somebody doesn't get paid, that's a significant economic impact to that employee during that particular month of their weekly paycheck. And that's not what I would define as our preferred approach. You mentioned the concept of furloughs. They're harder to implement. They require some additional actions by the regents in the Office of the President. But in that scenario, you could spread it out more evenly over the entire year if you were going to have some reduction. But at the current moment, there are no plans for furlough, and there are no plans for unpaid curtailment.
Fantastic, and thank you so much for sharing that with our attendees tonight. I know, folk, we can probably thank the Chancellor and thank the UC Office of the President. I know they made a commitment to our community, and they want to uphold that commitment. And certainly, we'll need to respond based upon future circumstances. But it's great to hear we're doing everything we can to keep people employed during this time. So, folk, if you're staying with us, I want to make sure that you keep on listening, that you stay tuned in. We have a special guest joining us tonight. I think you're going to enjoy the guest that's going to come on. So don't leave too soon, because we got a special guest. We got a few more questions, or well, quite a few questions we want to try and get through. Vice Chancellor Beck, you're doing such a phenomenal job. People are they're sending them our way. I'm going to go to some questions that we received before the town hall tonight. People are wondering about COVID and how the university is responding. You've shared some of that tonight, but they want to know, how can they stay informed? What's the best way to stay informed about UCLA's response to COVID?
So a number of options. One would be staying in touch with the UCLA COVID-19 website.
And by the way, who leads the COVID-19 task force?
So the COVID-19 task force is actually led by myself and Michael Morans, who's the former chair, or the previous chair of the Academic Senate.
Okay, fantastic. So they can go to the website. You said there were a couple of additional ways?
Yeah, they go to the website, and there's additional information. We actually post every day the new cases associated with the campus. We're actually finishing up a new dashboard associated with that. All of the messaging, all of the Bruin posts that we put are available there. If you're interested in the protocols or other sort of more technical data, you can go to bso.ucla.edu, which is Bruin Safe Online, and that has all of the protocols and sort of regulations that we've developed associated to mitigate the impacts of COVID. And those are probably the best places.
That's great to hear. And just so you know, our CEO, Julie Sina, just posted the covid-19.ucla.edu website in the chat. So if you want to click on that link, you can learn more about UCLA's response. A quick question for you. Is UCLA going to have, we all know the parking nightmare that can occur on campus. Are there going to be higher parking costs as a result of this, or we're going to hold those steady as well?
So what we've done for employees is, because the employees, non-represented employees, did not receive any increase this year, and it's not likely that they'll receive an increase in 2021. So we've made a commitment to hold the parking rates flat for this year and for the 2021-22 fiscal year. And then we also waived all parking fees from March until June, from April till June, so that wouldn't be an additional burden. We've also made it simpler for employees that are coming back to pay for daily permits instead of having to pay for the full monthly. We are continuing some of the other increases. For instance, the daily visitor rate is going from $13 to $14, but that's the original plan was to go to $15. So we've kept it at 14. We'll keep that at 14, I think, for 4 years, and then pivot to 15. So we're trying to create the balance of what our revenue needs are, as well as not trying to overburden the Bruin community with additional charges.
Thank you for that. So we're going to take the next 10 minutes or so to really try and focus on remote learning and on-campus experiences. As I mentioned earlier, to some of you who are here, to many of you who are here, I'm a faculty member in the Department of Public Health, and so I'll be able to share a little bit more about about what some of my experiences with students have been. But Vice Chancellor, I think some of the questions that are coming in, are really centered on some of the issues that students might be facing, and even some of the possibilities that UCLA could employ in order to provide for in-person learning. So, for example, why aren't we doing on-campus classes under tents in all of this open space we have?
That's a great question. At the moment, we're prohibited from doing that. That is something that we've looked at as a possibility when the county moves to the red stage, which would allow us to have some level of campus instruction, and really trying to balance the need for the students to be back on campus, as well as sort of the predictability for students, recognizing that if we bring too many students back and then there's an outbreak on campus, we may have to shift back like we did in March and send people home. And we definitely don't want to do that. So we're trying to be cautious about not bringing students back too quickly or in too great a numbers. The outdoor environment for teaching, we don't think that that's actually going to be necessary because of the number of facilities we have. And we've been testing all of the air handling equipment in all of the classrooms.
And there's a question we have about that specifically in terms of air handling. Like, will ventilation be adequate when they open? Will you bring in more fresh air? Are you going to have like UV filters? What's the sort of ventilation circulation in class experience supposed to be like, or in buildings experience supposed to be like?
Right. So we're looking at, like I said, we've been studying each of the buildings. Most of them all have MERV ratings of 14, which is above the rating of 13, which is necessary. And then and what's really important is actually looking at the replacement air. So how many replacement cycles occur within an hour, and making sure that we're far exceeding what the guidelines are. And then also recognizing the fact that when you look at physical distancing in the classroom, your classroom occupancy is 20 to 25% of the normal occupancy. So it's a combination between increasing outdoor air, increasing circulation, and having fewer individuals in each of the rooms, and everybody is required to be wearing a face covering while they're in the room. So
fantastic.
All of those mitigations should put us in a position in which it can be that people can feel relatively safe being in the classroom.
So, Vice Chancellor Beck, we're going to do a lightning round of questions. We're going to try and get to as many as we can in the next 4 minutes, if that's okay with you. And then we're gonna welcome our special guests. So, folks, stay on board. Don't leave us just yet. I know we have the presidential elections coming up. Yes, we will end by 6 p.m. so you can get to that nail-biting event. But I want to make sure that we have a chance to get to as many as we can. So, Vice Chancellor Beck, let's be really quick with this. Do we expect hybrid class to continue through the spring quarter?
In some fashion, hybrid classes or remote classes will need to be continued until we have a vaccine that's widely distributed throughout society.
Okay, so if that's the case and students need to take a quarter off, will they be permitted to do so, taking more than 1 quarter or multiple quarters without having to reapply?
So that, unfortunately, I can't answer that question, but I know students do end up taking a quarter off, but that's a little outside of my swim lane. Sorry.
Totally understand. I appreciate you being able to answer that question. A quick question for you is related to sort of whether or not we're studying whether or not the impact of online learning or remote learning. If we're studying the impact on students on campus, off campus, are we looking at how remote learning is improving or affecting teaching?
I think that's something that is, again, will help identify sort of what the opportunities are post-COVID. I would say that in most cases, we still strongly believe, particularly for the way in which we engage the students at UCLA, that in-person instruction is still a preferred method of instruction, but there's certainly some opportunities in which enhanced remote learning could be utilized to supplement some courses, and it may end up being a way to deliver some courses in the future, but we don't see UCLA shifting to any great deal post-COVID to remote learning, because we really do value the in-person instruction.
Fantastic. And then how often, you mentioned this earlier, but how often will testing, surveillance testing for those on campus be done?
So it's a number. So for most people, it's done every week. And then if we have positivity rates in excess of 2%, then they would go to twice a week. There are some groups that are tested every 2 weeks, and that they would go to every week if positivity. And just to give you an idea, our current positivity rate is 0.15%. So we're far from even 1%, let alone 2%. So it's so far been going well.
Fantastic. And now, folks, I just want to remind you that we're going to be welcoming our special guest here in just about a minute. But if we do not get to your question tonight, do not fret. You can post it in our follow-up questions session, because ultimately what we want to do is try and do our best to answer your questions but if we can't get to it tonight, do feel free to send it to us nonetheless, and we'll do our best to get your response. Final question for you, Vice Chancellor Beck, is related to the key lessons that UCLA is taking away from this pandemic. 30 seconds.
The key lessons is being prepared matters, and that UCLA has a remarkable community that has been incredibly flexible and responsive and ensuring the quality of the educational experience, even with the challenges that we've faced. And that's something I think that the alumni and parents and the whole community should be proud of. And there's just hundreds and thousands of employees that are working hard every day to ensure that UCLA can be respected as the #1 public university in the country.
Thank you so much. Let's give him a virtual round of applause. I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight, Vice Chancellor Michael Beck. Stand by. Folks, I told you we had a special guest tonight, and thank you all so much for joining us on our first town hall and our first outing. I promise that we will have some additional folks to join you. Before we wrap up tonight, I'm going to tell you how you can help give to our students, how you can be involved with the UCLA Alumni Association. There are a number of ways to be involved. I'm going to ask Julie to go ahead and post our giving links there if you want to dedicate funds for scholarships to them. We have a number of ways that you can do that. If you want to support them in their food pantry, help out with housing, support many students who are facing economic challenges, make sure you send us your contact information. We will follow up and get you connected to our teams here on the campus and provide support. Now, I want to thank our special guests for joining us tonight. I'm going to ask that Coach Corey Close, who is the coach of the women's basketball team, jump in, tell us about what's going on with women's basketball and sports on the campus. Thank you so much, Coach, for joining us. I got to tell you, I've had a couple of the women's basketball team players in my class on campus, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate the hard work you've done. So, Coach Close, take it away.
Well, that is the most meaningful part, right? That our players are not only being elite athletes, but also elite students on this amazing institution. And so thank you for saying that. You just made my night.
That's right.
But, you know, I just think I want to say thank you to the whole Alumni Association. It is such an honor to represent you. And I think about it all the time when I think about the path that we get to walk in of excellence, of pride, of elite academics, elite athletics, as well as elite people, elite givers, as I would say, that are giving back to our community, especially in times like these and in struggling through COVID-19 and absolutely wrestling and wanting to make a difference in the areas of racial injustice. You all, our alumni, have set the tone. This is what Bruins do. We take our education not only really seriously on an individual basis, but on a community basis. And at the same time, let's go win some national championships. So, you know, I'm really, really thankful to walk in the shoes of this group. You know, our team is back on campus. We're excited about being able to be together. It's very different. We are, you know, we're not allowed to be in our locker rooms. We're not allowed to even have a meal together. I'm not allowed to meet with our players except for an hour or less and outside, fully masked on campus. So there are limitations, but there's nothing like 6 months apart that will give you an appreciation for every little piece you get to be together. So we are starting our season on November 25th. The Pac-12 conference is again rated the #1 women's basketball conference in the country. We're preseason ranked top 10 in the country. And we're excited to represent this amazing institution in these incredible times. I just feel like there's just an added responsibility that when we step foot onto the court, we're competing at a high level, but we're also telling the stories of how we're making a difference, how our lives have been changed, how our players are courageously taking their learning from UCLA and putting it into practice in how they live their lives. So really excited for our opportunities coming up. As much adversity and as different as they will be, we will make the most of them, and we hope to represent you very, very well.
Coach Close, the GOAT, we want to thank you so much for being here, joining us on our UCLA Alumni Association Town Hall. I think it's important for folks to know that, you know, here at the university, you have a committed group of faculty, staff, and leaders, athletes. You know, the whole team is committed to making sure that our students have the best possible experience. For those of you who are asking questions about how we support the mental health of our students, do know that the university prioritizes that through on-campus and off-campus services. For those of you who are wondering how to give, there are links that we've made available. You can go to give2.ucla.edu/COVID-19. That'll provide opportunities to support students, research, education, and providers. For those of you who want to be even further informed, we'll make sure that you go visit our UCLA Alumni Association page or visit the ucla.edu page. And so, Coach Close, let me ask you, student athletes are, we have some of the most amazing athletes in the country, right? And I know that they are working hard. I have student athletes in my class now. And so how do you think, how are they holding up? How are they hanging, and making it through all of this?
Well, I'm going to be honest. It's hard. Most of our women have said this is the most difficult time in their lives. With the combination of losing their March Madness in their NCAA tournament last year, going to remote learning, being apart from each other, the anxiety of will I get to come back? There's been a lot. And then you add on to the issues in our country of surrounding racial injustice, and you're talking about a big burden. I couldn't agree with you more that our university has prioritized mental health. And I will tell you that most of our team has taken advantage of some of those resources. That this has been difficult, and we are absolutely committed. I remember when we came back on September 14th, my priorities were, number one, were physical preparation, just because they had never had 6 months off in their life. And number two was mental health and wellness. And the rest of the tactical stuff, that will take its time, because this has been a really difficult season of life for these student athletes, and being able to meet them where they are and provide these resources has been absolutely imperative.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I think you answered a question that came in from the audience. It's how they're staying physically prepared. How are you making sure that happens?
Yeah, we have a great team that's doing that, but we've really used leaning on technology. So all last year we used technology. They wear a GPS and a heart rate monitor in every practice and every game. And what we were able to do is, okay, where we were last year with a normal training regimen? What was the load on their bodies during games? And then when they came in, we did all of this baseline testing, and then we're actually measuring the load, change of direction, explosive movements. And we're trying not to increase more than 5 to 10% per week. That's probably more information that you wanted, but we're trying to be very analytical about this. We're trying to take the guesswork out of it, because I do believe in my 27-year career, there's the most risk of injury at this time. And so we need to be as meticulous and strategic and data oriented as we possibly can to put our women and our men in the chance to be successful after having such a long period off.
Thank you so much for that, Coach. Folks, thank you for joining us tonight at our first UCLA Alumni Association Town Hall. I am thankful that Coach Close joined us. Thank Vice Chancellor Michael Beck for joining us as well. We hope that you enjoyed tonight's session, that you get a lot of information out from it. I do want to let you know that our next guest at our next town hall will be Chancellor Block himself. And so please, be prepared to join us again. You'll get to learn more about the campus, what's happening at our university, learn about how you can get involved, how you can be a part of our association as alums, as a Bruin family, so that we can continue to support our students both on and off the campus and connect to each other during this very critical time. Again, I am D'Artagnan Scorza, a proud double Bruin, the president of your UCLA Alumni Association. I want to thank our Bruin family for joining us tonight. I want to thank our board members for joining tonight. I want to thank Team Alumni, Christine, Jacob, and Julie for hosting tonight's session. I wish you all the best. I know you got to get to your debates. I need to do that as well. And we'll look forward to seeing you back here at our next town hall featuring Chancellor Gene Block. Have a wonderful evening, and go Bruins.